The earliest evidence of human existence takes us back about 177,000 years, with the birth of civilization not happening anytime soon. But to understand civilization, we need to focus on the general agreed upon model. So let's take you all on a journey of how civilization was formed. It goes something like this. In the start, it was all about subsistence farming, and the factors like ration, access to arable land, grain, or irrigation water determined where people would settle. However, the variation of said factors meant that they would need to continue moving as there was little incentive and chance of survival if they were to stay in one place. Amongst all this wandering, and out of nowhere, comes Göbekli Tepe, a disruptive find for archaeologists as it makes them question their initial model. This site provides a unique insight that even though people had not yet discovered domestication, they worked together to build temples. Göbekli Tepe, a temple estimated to be built around 9000 BC. This even predates agriculture. At this time, people were hunter gatherers. They used to hunt for animals and look for wild berries. The construction of the temple required people to work together in groups for long periods of time, which provides evidence as to how religion follows settlement in this model of civilization. Now that people had started settling in well, they needed a more permanent form of food source which they could rely on. The people of Göbekli Tepe start examining with all sorts of food sources and are believed to be the first ones who started consuming wheat. But there were more needs to fulfill than just grain. Mesopotamia is a fine example and an ideal site for one of the most significant civilizations of history. It seemed a good choice to settle down because of the presence of water and consequently fertile land along the rivers. This enabled people to form settlements and started living permanently in one place. Now that they had settled in well, there was a need for regulation of these food reserves. There was a need for hierarchy. But still, some felt that they could achieve this balance without it. Enters Çatalhöyük, a place which had been known for its architecture and the numerous evidences directing us towards believing that it was an equal society with no hierarchical structure. The architecture of this place is proof of how the people had no form of structure and lived on equal grounds, literally. There were no hierarchical or communal buildings. This proof extends to the skeletons found at the site as well. Similar marks of soot and ribs have both male and female skeletons provide adequate evidence that both sexes shared work equally and thus had equal roles in society. During this time, shifting to a more permanent form of living was in its infancy and the main priority for people was to survive. However, as the crop yield started becoming surplus, that's when hoarding began, which led to further disputes between the people, who did not have a societal structure based on which they could have a formulated conflict resolving mechanism. The lack of this decision making system for the society as a whole is the likeliest reason for the downfall of Çatalhöyük. The major civilizations that follow, Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Assyrians, the Hittites, and others, are all examples of hierarchical civilization, varying between religious and a political form of hierarchy, where either priests and councils held strong positions. The hierarchical society examples that have just been mentioned are in no way a better solution to the problem of Çatalhöyük, but, as better stated by James C. Scott, the only possible scaffolding available for the design of a state. Therefore, it is important to understand that the hierarchical structure which is followed to this date in its different variations has its own setbacks and shortcomings.
Let's take a look at how hierarchy works comparing to equality. According to Babylonian civilization leader Hammurabi's code, society is divided into three classes: superior people, commoners, and slaves. Also, gender values and the hierarchy in family relationships are dependent on these rules. It was clearly nonsense with today's perception of justice. For example, if you are a daughter of a nobleman and your father killed another nobleman's daughter, then it is you who is going to be killed because you are seen as the property of your family. It is believed that Hammurabi is a chosen one by the gods, so that is unquestionable what he says and makes them do. In this point of view, nobody is free. Even Hammurabi is a missionary to rule the empire. That is why there is little rebellion against the above, but more wildness against below. You are as strong as the quantity of the people below you, which is decided by the gods. Aristotle also sees the slaves have a slavish nature, whereas free people have a free spirit. On the other hand, in 1776, the American Declaration of Independence asserted that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Americans got the idea of equality from Christianity. So after 3,500 years later, a God saying something totally different. However, if we look scientifically, humans are not created, we are evolved. Therefore, the combination of genes made us able to do what we are capable of. Also, there is no such thing as rights in biology. Birds fly not because they have the right to fly, because they have wings. Of course, it is obvious that not all human beings are biologically equal, yet it is necessary to believe so, to have an organized, prosperous, and stabilized society. However, with the same logic, Hammurabi's code also can be justified by saying, of course, I know superiors, commoners, and slaves are not different people, but if we believe so, it will help us to create a better society. It is not possible to say that only one is correct. Okay, a bird flies because it has wings, and why not, right? But what about richness? Do rich people have a special gene to be born with it? Do they deserve every dollar they spend? The rich mostly are born into rich families. They didn't do something special to reach that point, and until the death, it continued like that while the same scenario happened to the poor. Unfortunately, it creates a hierarchy that naturally keeps existing and it is hard to break. As a role of hierarchy, only the strong deserve to survive. Natural selection is a result of hierarchy. In these kind of groups, social hierarchy also can be observed. So what I mean by strength is not only physical, it is also social. If a baby is seen funny looking, without hair or weak, or if it is a girl, then it is likely to be destroyed. Another role of hierarchy is to make it easier to communicate without spending time to discover the right way to talk. Equality pushes every individual to be adequately good in everything, rather than being a member of a group and creating an organism that works perfectly. Today's world became a melting pot as a result of trying to be equal with others. With the internet, anything can be reached, used, and produced. You cannot differentiate if somebody is financially weak or strong, and also it is not explicitly obvious if you are a very important person. So labels and all that upper class belongings are a mask to protect ourselves from upper class bullying.
To find a balance between the two forms of civilization is a feat that has not yet been achieved ever since the dawn of civilization. But human beings have realized that the hierarchical form of society is the lesser of the two evils. It provides the necessary structure for decision making that had been missing from the Çatalhöyük, and even though it might not be the fairest, its fundamental principle is to satisfy the majority, and the minority then adapts. With hierarchical civilizations which had kings and emperors at the top, there always was a possibility of opposition and eventual takeover if they were unable to rule effectively, something which is non existent in the non hierarchical form of society. A lack of this would create a chaos, and as it stands, the people have accepted that a major unrest is still better than the complete chaos.